So it's no secret that Microsoft is absolutely struggling when it comes to the sales of the Xbox console. Now, the Xbox platform itself is doing okay, but the console hardware has seen a decline year over year, month over month, every month for about a year and a half now. So we're going to talk about the struggles that they're having in this article from The Verge titled Microsoft Surface and Xbox hardware revenues take a big hit in Q3. We are going to be skipping into different parts of this article because not all of it focuses on gaming. So we're only going to be covering the things that are relevant to this gaming channel and what we report on usually. Hey everybody, I'm Bobby here with Direct Gaming, and we're talking about Microsoft Q3 revenues and what that means for the future of Microsoft Gaming and Xbox as a brand. If you're brand new here and you enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. If you don't enjoy this video, make sure you leave a dislike and let us know in the comments what we can do better in the future. So getting into this article written by Tom Warren of The Verge, Microsoft just posted the third quarter of its 2024 fiscal financial results. The software maker made $61.9 billion in revenue and a net income of $21.9 billion during Q3. Revenue is up 17% and net income has increased 20%. This is the second quarter in a row that Microsoft is including its additional revenue from its Activision Blizzard acquisition that briefly pushed gaming to be Microsoft's third largest business. This time around, gaming is back into fourth place behind Windows thanks to a stronger than expected Windows OEM revenue this quarter. Despite a strong quarter for Microsoft with Office revenue and Microsoft Cloud revenue up 23% year over year, Microsoft's overall gaming revenues are only up thanks to Activision Blizzard, with Xbox hardware revenue tanking this quarter alongside devices. Surface revenue also dropping once again. There are a few paragraphs here that we're going to skip because they're not relevant to what we're talking about. They're about Snapdragon processors and their new Surface things and stuff like that. But moving on, Microsoft is now expecting Q4 devices revenue to decline again in the mid-teens according to Microsoft CFO Amy Hood. Windows OEM revenue growth should be in the low to mid single digits in Q4, and the PC market volumes are expected to continue at pre-pandemic levels. Over on the Xbox and gaming side, Xbox content and services revenue, which includes Xbox Game Pass, is up by 62%. This is once again thanks to Activision Blizzard revenues making up the bulk of the revenue. Microsoft revealed in February that Xbox Game Pass has now grown to 34 million subscribers, including the Xbox Game Pass Core, previously known as Xbox Live Gold members. 4 previously Xbox exclusive games are now available on PS5, with some launching on Nintendo Switch 2. This strategic shift is limited to these games for now, but it appears to be in response to a slowing Xbox Game Pass growth and Xbox console sales. We're expanding our games to new platforms, bringing 4 of our fan favorite to Nintendo Switch and Sony PlayStation for the first time, said Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella during an earnings call today. In fact, earlier this month, we had 7 games among the top 25 on the PlayStation Store, more than any other publisher. Despite some early successes for Xbox games on rival platforms, Xbox hardware is down by a massive 31% this quarter, a big drop following a soft quarter for Xbox sales during the all-important holiday season last year. Microsoft admits the obvious in its earnings filing, that the big drop was, quote, driven by lower volume of consoles sold, end quote. Overall, gaming revenue is up 51%, bolstered by the additional Activision Blizzard revenue, which contributed 55 points of net impact. That means without Activision Blizzard, Microsoft's overall gaming revenue would have actually declined this quarter. The newly acquired division recorded $1.97 billion in revenue during Q3, but the cost of integration, transaction costs, and the other costs of revenue all total $980 million. With other operating expenses, $1.34 billion, it calculates to an overall operating loss of $350 million for Activision Blizzard. Xbox content and services would have only been up a single percent without Activision Blizzard. So it's clear that this giant purchase is already having a big impact on Microsoft's overall gaming revenues. It looks like next quarter is going to be a similar story for gaming at Microsoft too. Microsoft CFO Amy Hood says the company is expecting Xbox hardware revenues to decline again next quarter, alongside overall gaming revenue growth in the low to mid 40% region, with around 50 points of impact from Activision Blizzard. Xbox content and services revenue is expected to be up in the high 50% region in Q4, driven by 60 points of impact from Activision Blizzard. Now, that's really all the pertinent information that we are going to get from this article. We're going to leave a link down in the description below. If you'd like to read the whole thing, you're more than welcome. So the interesting things here are that Microsoft's gaming division would have been operating at a overall pretty massive loss in terms of everything if it wasn't for Activision Blizzard. Now, you can say, hey, fair game. They bought Activision Blizzard, so it's theirs, so they get that revenue, and that's true. However, one thing has to be fairly certain at this point, especially with the comments coming from Satya Nadella, is that Xbox is really looking like they're gearing up to be a publisher, and they're going to be more than happy with that. They're all about software, and they always have been. When you look back through the history of the company, they've never really been great in the hardware game, things like the Zune, the Windows Phone. Every piece of hardware outside of the Xbox has come and gone relatively quickly with Microsoft, and they have not really been successful with those. Now, Microsoft did get really lucky in the mid-2000s with the Xbox 360 because Sony fumbled so badly that generation with the PS3. They overpriced it, and it was really difficult for developers to work for, whereas the 360 was really, really easy to develop for. What that did was create an environment where Microsoft's Xbox 360 could really, really take over and make an impact and be the first real challenger to the PlayStation since the Dreamcast went away, which is very, very nice to have. Unfortunately, with the reveal of the Xbox One, that did not go very well for Microsoft, and they've been on the back foot with the hardware ever since. Now, the Xbox Series X and Series S both sounded like a fantastic proposition at the beginning of this generation. As someone who does not really care for Microsoft hardware, was almost going to get a Series X because of all the promises that they made at the beginning of this generation, that it was going to run 4K, native games, 60 FPS for everything. And hell, I almost bought an S after I got my PS5 because I thought, hey, a 1440p, I could hook that up to my gaming monitor and just veg and play, games on Xbox, especially with Game Pass. Sounded like a great opportunity for like a little fun side system. Thankfully, I didn't get an Xbox console because both of them have kind of been shown to hamstring the other, as unfortunate as that is. The Series S is absolutely like an anchor around the neck of the Series X. It looks like, hey, the Series X could run just about anything you throw at it that Xbox has made at 60 FPS, but I think they don't want to do that if the Series S can't run it at 60 FPS, because there's no reason that something like Starfield shouldn't be able to run at 60 FPS on the Series X with everything that it has going for it. And the same thing with Hellblade 2 coming up. That absolutely should have been something that on the Series X is running at 60 FPS, but we see that it's not. And I think it's because the Series S now has become the most popular console for Xbox owners. Apparently, the split is something like 70-30 in favor of the Series S, which makes sense because with the tough economic times that have been happening the past 4 or so years, coupled with the fact that Microsoft made a lot of lofty promises that people bought into about the Series S, it's really no wonder that people have kind of just tuned out to Xbox as a console as a whole. Microsoft has just basically made blunder after blunder this generation and last generation, let's be honest, with lack of exclusive games last generation. This generation starting to publish what were exclusive games on their rivals' platform now, including something like Hi-Fi Rush, which is their first really new IP they've had developed under them that's come out. It came out getting rave reviews. And now if you're someone who does play on PlayStation, you can play that game with no problems. And same thing for Sea of Thieves and Grounded. Those are coming out, and those were some games that might have had a big draw to the Xbox platform. I feel like the writing is on the wall at this point, with Satya Nadella commenting so much on how their software being everywhere is just good for them and for gamers. Despite all the promises that Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond have made about the next-gen Xbox, I cannot see a world where Satya Nadella looks at what's happening right now and approves the R&D as well as the creation of a brand new set of hardware that's just going to lose them money when they have a sure shot to making Xbox and Microsoft gaming actually functionally profitable for the first time in about 20 years. I do not see how anything else is going to happen other than the Xbox consoles being taken out of the way. When you think about the profit that Activision makes, right? Activision makes profit from Call of Duty, makes a ton of profit from King. That mobile money has got to have Satya going, oh, we need to get this going. This has got to be the way because I want us to be making money, because the more money they make, the more money Satya gets at the end of the day, and that's what he's concerned with. But when you see that they spent that $70 billion on Activision and that's the only thing keeping them afloat, that they're laying off a bunch of people to keep those costs down, to keep those numbers pumped up for quarter three, that they're canceling things like BlizzCon, which are staples of Blizzard and Activision's brand identity for almost 2 decades now, it's really hard to see them wanting to keep that albatross of a hardware platform open and losing them money. I don't think there's any way that anyone can deny that Xbox as a console is looking like it's going the way of Sega. And I was a huge fan of Sega way up until the end. I had a Dreamcast and all that, but Xbox lost my patronage on the hardware front years ago. Now, I still do have Game Pass on PC, and if I really love an Xbox game, I will buy it on PC. I don't have any qualms doing that. I just bought Fallout 4 again, because it was on sale for like $5 the other day. I bought it on PlayStation and on PC, even though I have the physical copy on PlayStation. I figured, hey, it's $5 for a digital version, then I want to switch the disc out. I already own a physical, so there's no chance of me losing it anyway. I'll always have that disc there. But when you see the dwindling hardware numbers keep just getting worse and worse, to the fact that they are way behind even their worst selling console of all time after the same amount of release time, just from a purely business standpoint, it gets harder and harder to justify the existence of Xbox hardware, something that they're already taking losses on, and it's not really netting people into their ecosystem like they hope it would, like Nintendo and Sony use those consoles for. Yeah, those companies might take a loss too, but they're getting people dedicated and building up those digital libraries so that they can stay in that, and that's where Sony and Nintendo are making their money back, right? If you have a ton of Switch games, especially if you bought them day one, Nintendo has made a ton of money off you. And same thing for Sony. But Microsoft isn't even getting that because they're just playing the Game Pass game. But even then, we're seeing that those numbers are not going up the way they want it. Now, one of the things that really is going to be interesting for us to see is whether or not that Activision Blizzard revenue stays the way it is with Microsoft's policies, right? I feel like King will probably actually be the thing that keeps them in the game. We already talked about how Call of Duty Mobile is not really making them very much money right now. But I think unless they do something catastrophic, like Candy Crush will survive the apocalypse. It's like a cockroach, right? It's going to survive anything that anyone could possibly do to it. But the same cannot be said for franchises like Overwatch, like World of Warcraft, like other Blizzard IPs, right? They just canceled a bunch of Blizzard IPs along with BlizzCon and laid a ton of people off. So those people are not going to be coming back as full-time salaried employees. They're likely going to be replaced by contractors, which is going to mean the studio gets less and less solid work because they're going to constantly have talent turnover that leads to similar situations as to what we've seen with 343 and Arcane, right? We saw Halo Infinite really came out and was borked, and Redfall was one of the most disastrous releases that I've seen in a long time. The fact that Gollum came out like a month later is literally the only thing that saved Redfall from being one of the worst releases last year. Let's also not forget that the King Kong game came out last year, and that looked like it was put together in like an hour and a half by someone with like an Unreal tutorial. But it taking something like that to knock Microsoft out of the worst game of the year running is kind of ridiculous, considering they are one of, if not the biggest gaming publisher in the world now. Hopefully we see this resurgence of interest in Fallout thanks to the TV show doing something better for their numbers, but I really worry about things like Blizzard and Activision. I mean, Activision, has been on a downward slide, and so has Blizzard for a long time. But we could see those slides go just like off a cliff with Microsoft's contractor policies kicking in sooner than later. But with Game Pass struggling to get any new members past like the ones that are already gotten in and are interested on console and on PC, it's very clear that Microsoft has taken a bunch of gambles that have not paid off, and so maybe they can make Activision Blizzard work out for them, but only time will tell. What do you think about Microsoft's huge increase in earnings and it being tied basically solely to Activision Blizzard? And what do you think about Game Pass struggling and the hardware going down again year over year and month over month. Let me ask you this. If you're an Xbox owner, are you disappointed with this generation? The fact that you invested in something that now the exclusives that you wanted are getting put onto other platforms? And if you're someone who doesn't own an Xbox, what do you think about buying one now, knowing that Microsoft seems to be kind of turning towards that third-party publisher all-around route? Would you buy an Xbox knowing that you could buy a PlayStation and play things like Horizon, God of War, Spider-Man, and Sea of Thieves and Hi-Fi Rush, maybe Halo, Forza, and Gears, that kind of old-school Xbox stuff in the future? And really, one final question. If you are an Xbox fan, a fan of the ecosystem, a fan of the console, do you believe that Xbox will have a next-generation console? Are they going to stay in the hardware business? Let us know in the comments. We do read all of the comments and respond to as many as we have time for. We're going to be pretty busy coming up, but we're going to try and keep up with them as much as we can. Now, if you want to keep up with us on the things that we do, you can catch us on Twitter at 59Direct, or you can follow me personally at LittleBobbyTV. Those are the handles that you can follow to talk to us. We also have at Gaming Talon if you want to talk to Talon. He loves talking to people about games on Twitter. We do it all day. And I do want to thank you so much for watching today. Again, I'm Bobby with Direct Gaming, and I hope to see you soon.